Call of Duty Black Ops 7 entered development as a classic continuation of the popular Black Ops sub-series, being co-developed by Treyarch and Raven Software. This collaboration aimed to combine Treyarch's legacy with Raven's modern technical capabilities, seeking to deliver an experience that was both a return to the roots and a substantial technical evolution. The game's setting in 2035, the near future, marks a coherent thematic choice with the events of Black Ops 2 from 2012, bringing back David Mason as the protagonist, along with his team. The development context revolved around the promise of delivering a robust single-player or cooperative campaign, combined with intense multiplayer modes and the always popular round-based zombies mode, with the intention of pleasing both longtime fans and new players. During development, there was notable attention to community feedback, especially after criticism suffered in previous titles in the franchise. Treyarch adopted an active stance to quickly react to suggestions and complaints, adjusting weapons, movement, and matchmaking systems in real time, which marks an important change from the more rigid development cycles of the past. This effort to listen to players was widely praised as an effective response, attempting to restore confidence in a series that had been suffering from wear and tear due to experimental mechanic changes that were not always well received. The return of the Prestige system, with a global progression that connects all modes, was also a clear attempt to give the player more freedom and a real sense of continuous progress. However, the direction of movement and the fluidity of the gameplay received more specific criticism. Despite omni-movement being expanded with the promise of making the action faster and more dynamic, animation elements fell short of expectation. For example, the climbing system is considered slow and disjointed from the game's accelerated speed. The discrepancy between the fast overall movement and certain slow animations, such as reloading weapons or swapping equipment, creates an odd sensation, a mismatch that affects the immersion and typical fluidity of the series. This type of criticism points to a recurring issue in AAA franchises: the difficulty in balancing innovation with the essence of the established and beloved fan experience. The development environment faced the harsh reality of franchise fatigue and explicit fear among the responsible studios. Despite the commitment to innovate and adjust details according to feedback, the initial reception and player interest on Steam already indicate that Black Ops 7 needs to overcome the natural saturation of the market. This is a difficulty that many long-running series face, maintaining freshness and high expectation with each release without seeming repetitive or forced. The challenge for Treyarch and Raven is, therefore, to balance tradition with innovation, something that perhaps only time and post-launch adjustments can accurately define. Black Ops 7 arrives with a gameplay that, to my surprise, seems stuck in the past, destroying any expectation of significant innovation. The deceleration of pace, which at first glance seemed like a step in the right direction to bring greater control and strategy, in practice tends to make matches slower and more drawn out in crucial moments. This removes the adrenaline that has always been the hallmark of the series and gives a feeling of a less fluid game, which can drive away players more accustomed to the frenzy of previous titles, without in fact compensating with real tactical depth. The map design, although attempting to offer more space for movement and verticality, falls into the usual cliché and does not present enough creativity to lift the game out of monotony. The introduction of the wall jump sounds more like a fad than an organic idea for the franchise's universe, often hindering more than helping in intense combat. For me, this mechanic brought more frustration than excitement, with controls that do not respond well to this movement and compromise the fluidity of the gameplay at certain moments. The equipment system with overclocks, despite seeming promising on paper, ended up falling into a cliché of customization that is already saturated in so many modern shooters. Beyond the technical aspect, the real problem remains: the spamming of grenades and equipment that pollutes matches and nullifies the feeling of fair play. There is that impression that Treyarch prefers to encourage strategies based on cheap and repetitive tactics instead of valuing the player's skill and intelligence. Another point that I believe to be a mistake was the imposition of the dexterity perk as mandatory. This decision is not only a technical failure, but a setback for the diversity of styles that the series could explore. This obligation makes the gameplay monotonous, severely limiting creativity when assembling the loadout, as if there were only one correct way to play. It is disappointing to see such a large and influential franchise clinging to this narrow idea, alienating precisely the players who seek greater balance and more personalized gameplay. In the zombies mode, despite the attempt to refresh the formula with new melee attacks and adjustments to annoying mechanics like the mystery box and protection against accidental round flips, I feel that Black Ops 7 was not audacious enough. The mode remains stuck in already beaten formulas, and the feeling that we are always playing the same recycled content persisted throughout my experience. Once again, Treyarch proves to be conservative, neglecting a clear opportunity to truly break with the past and deliver something genuinely innovative. Overall, the gameplay of Black Ops 7 for me is a typical example of how a franchise can stall in time, repeating formulas with little imagination and betting on nostalgia to maintain fan interest. There is nothing that really justifies enthusiasm beyond the minimum expected. This reveals a creative crisis in the studio, which urgently needs to rethink its approach or risk losing relevance in an increasingly competitive market filled with fresher and smarter alternatives. I think Black Ops 7 makes it clear that Treyarch is comfortable betting on a community that accepts the basics, even if it means delivering a product that borders on mediocre in terms of innovation and gameplay evolution. For me, this is frustrating, because I see a franchise with immense potential that deserved and needed to be more daring and creative. This feeling of being old and tired in the gameplay may be the harbinger of greater wear and tear if there is no urgent shift in future productions. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is set in 2035, 10 years after the events of Black Ops 2, and resumes the story of the protagonist David Mason, who leads a team of agents to face a manipulative enemy that uses fear as its main weapon. The narrative fits directly into the timeline established by the Black Ops series, bringing continuity for old fans, but inserting a futuristic atmosphere that adds new elements to the scenario of psychological warfare and violent conflicts. This setting is interesting because, while bringing a futuristic angle, it remains faithful to the tense and strategic tone of the series. In the campaign, the game maintains the possibility of being played in both single-player and cooperative mode, bringing back something that had been little explored in recent titles. The inclusion of co-op is a smart move to broaden the experience and engagement, especially for players who enjoy playing with friends. However, from a personal point of view, the narrative, despite neatly tying up the loose ends of the plot started in Black Ops 2, does not innovate much in its storyline or characters. It remains stuck in a classic style, which for me shows Treyarch's resistance to risking big changes to the franchise's story. Despite all the nostalgia and the attempt to rescue elements that marked the series, Black Ops 7 brings nothing revolutionary to the formula. The plot, although competent, is not memorable. The multiplayer is solid, but with few surprises, and the zombies mode is the most creative, but still somewhat stuck in already beaten patterns. In my view, Black Ops 7 is a game for fans who want the continuity of what they like, without major transformations, and not for those seeking a reinvention of the franchise. This makes it safe, but also somewhat predictable. Ultimately, my opinion is that Black Ops 7 fulfills its role as a direct sequel within the Black Ops series, pleasing its loyal audience with refined gameplay and a connected narrative, but also demonstrating a notable resistance to more daring changes. For those who are fans of the franchise, it is an expected and fun return most of the time, but for those who want something new, the experience may seem a little repetitive and worn out, which highlights a common challenge in long-running franchises, balancing tradition and innovation without losing the essence. The game presents graphics that initially seem to fulfill the basic expectation of a AAA title released in 2025, but which honestly fail to impress. The technology used in the graphic engine is efficient, the textures are reasonably detailed, and the light and shadow effects bring good realism to the environments. However, for me, it lacks that quality of polish, and that striking visual identity that would make the game stand out in a competitive scenario, where other shooting and action titles are already exploring much more in terms of realism and visual innovation. The biggest problem I noticed in the visuals of Black Ops 7 is the artistic design, which seems generic and uninspired to me. The scenographies, even if varied, lack personality and often seem like just functional scenarios, without a soul or a unique visual identity that sticks in the player's memory. This makes the game visually common and forgettable, compared to competitors who bet on more creative and impactful environments. There is a clear feeling of a lack of investment in conceptual design, something essential for games of this caliber. Despite the technical improvements, with well-crafted character models and fluid animations, I felt that the game fails by not taking full advantage of the capabilities of current platforms. The moment of action is built with efficient dynamic lighting, but it does not surprise and in many moments becomes inconsistent, with shadows that seem artificial and particle effects that repeat too much. For a game that should represent the pinnacle of the franchise, this seems like a worrying sign of low visual ambition. Another point to criticize is the excessive repetition of textures and models, which compromise the feeling of immersion, especially in long phases or multiplayer matches that extend across extensive maps. The visual fatigue appears quickly, and this lack of variety stands out negatively. The visual impact for me ends up being too superficial and functional, not inviting the player to explore and marvel at the environment design, as expected in a game that wants to hold the audience in prolonged matches. Regarding special effects, Black Ops 7 bets on explosions and projectiles that are visually impactful, but which bring little innovation. The explosions are flashy, but generic, and the particle, smoke, and fire effects do not have enough variation to avoid the feeling of repetition. It is a safe package which fulfills what it promised, but without the capacity to make the player stop and be surprised. Thus, the visual remains more in the realm of the functional than the artistic or evocative. Even in the zombies mode, where one might expect a more daring and atmospheric visual work, Black Ops 7 remains mediocre. The dark and detailed scenarios could be a highlight if there was a greater investment in lighting and design to create truly threatening and distinct scenarios. Instead, what we have are environments that fulfill their role, but fail to convey that feeling of urgency and fear in a truly visceral way. This clearly demonstrates the lack of daring in exploring the graphic potential to create a more engaging atmosphere. My evaluation is that Black Ops 7 delivers competent graphics, but which border on mediocre for current standards. The lack of visual innovation and artistic personality say a lot about the current state of the franchise and the studio's unwillingness to take risks to visually impress. For me, the result is a game that technically works, but which does not excite or create that lasting visual impact that could elevate the experience beyond the simple more of the same. If this is the trend for future releases, Black Ops may lose ground to more ambitious competitors. Black Ops 7 delivers a performance that, at first glance, seems satisfactory, but which reveals a series of problems and limitations that significantly compromised my experience with the game. On current platforms like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, the game runs at competent resolutions, generally reaching dynamic 4K, but the frame rate, although promised to be stable at 60 FPS, presents frequent drops, especially in moments of greater crowds and intense explosions, which compromises the fluidity of combat, something unacceptable for an FPS that relies heavily on precision and timing. One of the biggest performance problems I noticed was the loading time, which, despite the expected improvements for this generation of consoles, is still considerably long and can break the pace of the game, especially in the transition between multiplayer matches and different modes within the game. This delay seems like a failure in engine optimization, which is disappointing for a title that should be a technical benchmark for the franchise and a showcase for the capabilities of current machines. For PC players, the situation does not improve much. The optimization leaves something to be desired, with reports and observations confirming occasional crashes and FPS drops, even on medium configurations. I particularly felt that the game does not explore the hardware well, often requiring manual adjustments to achieve stable performance. This creates a barrier for those seeking the best possible experience without having to reduce the graphic quality to maintain fluid gameplay, which is an important negative point in my evaluation. Another aspect that affected me was the netcode, especially in online multiplayer. The feeling of latency and drag in some matches was notorious, and although Treyarch sought improvements compared to Black Ops 6, there are still clear problems that harm combat, especially in more competitive level games. For me, this takes away some of the satisfaction and adrenaline of the multiplayer, as the feeling that the shots do not sync correctly with the actions in the game ends up making the matches frustrating. The performance in Zombies mode is slightly better in terms of stability, but even there I noticed some frame drops when there are many hordes on screen and intense use of visual effects. Although this is not catastrophic, it is a reminder that the game engine still has difficulty dealing with processing peaks, which could be minimized with better optimization that, honestly, I expected from a title of this caliber. Something that also deserves criticism is the choice of engine, which, even updated, seems increasingly limited for what Treyarch and Activision want to deliver. The lack of refinement and the feeling that the engine is stretched beyond its technical limit are evident in moments of loading, textures that take time to appear, and in performance problems with multiple players on large maps. For me, this shows that it is time to think about a new engine or more modern solutions to guarantee the future of the franchise. Black Ops 7 fell far short of what I expected for a top title in 2025. While delivering functional peaks in calm moments, It does not sustain the necessary stability when the action heats up, harming the overall experience. This, for me, is unacceptable for a franchise the size of Call of Duty, and shows that despite all the investment and hype, the game still fails in one of the most basic and essential points for gameplay in a modern shooter: technical autonomy and optimized processing. If Treyarch does not correct this, it may lose a significant portion of the most demanding and competitive players. Buying Black Ops 7 at launch is a decision that, in my view, requires a considerable dose of caution, mainly considering the recent history of the franchise and the problems that the game presents right away. The expectation for the title is high, especially for Black Ops series fans, but the initial experience may not justify the full investment at full price. With a campaign that offers little new and a gameplay that, although refined, does not bring clear revolutions, the game may end up frustrating those who wanted a true renewal. A factor that weighs against the immediate purchase is the full price, which, compared to the content delivered right at launch, seems not very advantageous to me. In addition to the main campaign, which already does not arouse much enthusiasm, the multiplayer and zombies mode show technical problems and lack of depth in some aspects. This combination makes me think that waiting for a sale or price drop is more sensible, especially for players who are not unconditional fans or who seek the best cost benefit. Another point to consider is the history of patches and updates from Treyarch and Activision, which generally fix bugs, improve performance, and add relevant content after launch. If you don't mind waiting a little for the game to be more polished, this wait can bring a more satisfactory experience and less frustration. I particularly think that buying at launch is betting on an unfinished product, something that discourages me when it comes to such highly anticipated and expensive games. The routine of annual Call of Duty releases also influences the decision. Knowing that the studios are under pressure to release the game as soon as possible, often with tight deadlines, it is common for the game at launch to be far from ideal in terms of gameplay, performance, and content. This only reinforces the idea that waiting for a sale, when the game has undergone adjustments, is a more prudent and intelligent choice from a financial and satisfaction point of view. Furthermore, sales are common on digital platforms, especially months after launch, and usually reduce prices considerably, making it possible to acquire the game with a discount that better justifies the purchase. There is also the benefit that, by waiting a little, there will already be a more consistent base of reviews and opinions, which avoids unpleasant surprises and ensures that you make a more conscious purchase and aligned with your player profile. My personal recommendation is that, unless you are a fervent fan of the franchise or a competitive player who needs to be at the peak immediately, waiting for a sale to buy Black Ops 7 is the best way. This saves you from paying the full price for a product that may still have technical flaws and lack of complete content, in addition to guaranteeing more time for the game to receive the adjustments that many gamers consider necessary for a truly satisfactory experience.
Hostiles overloaded our zone! Secure the new device! Enter zone. They have the overload device.
Knock it off!